everyone, welcome to the reference part of Chapter 6, Being a Professional. What does it mean to be a professional? It's been an argument or a debate for some time whether teaching is in fact a profession or not. Some of the characteristics of professions seem to fit teaching fairly well, others less so. So let's consider some of the characteristics of a professional and see how well teaching fits that particular label. The first thing we see with many professions is that they require some form of specialized training and a formal qualification before one is allowed to practice or work. In other occupations, this isn't the case. In many cases, for example, people learn on the job, watching somebody else gradually being shown what to do, and we would call this sort of approach a craft. And this is very, very common in more traditional societies. However, with teaching, it's developed over time to the extent that we now believe teachers should have specialized training before they begin teaching, rather than simply having an aptitude for teaching or having been a successful student. Professions and members of professions often have significant responsibility for other people and resources. For example, an engineer is responsible for buildings or bridges that basically have importance to society and community, but also, if they are done badly, could result in injury or harm. So a follow-up point on this one is that society places a great deal of trust in the professions because of important work that they do. So, is teaching a profession? Well, it fits some of the definitions as we've said earlier. In early times, teachers learned on the job. There was the notion of the student teacher or the pupil teacher, who was often a bright student. And in that class, which was often a multi-age class, they would begin to assist the teacher with some of the tasks of teaching during the daytime. Working with younger students, for example, we required them to undertake those courses before they could practice on their own with classes of students. That's not to mean that a lot of teaching and a lot of teacher training is not on the job. It is. We can't produce a fully formed professional from teacher training. So what we do is giving people a foundation and some of the skills and knowledge they need to begin teaching. But an important aspect of teaching is that the professional learning continues throughout your career. So we have a situation where in most parts of the world now, teachers need to gain a teaching qualification of some sort. Usually before, but sometimes during their work as a teacher. And in fact, many teachers engage in further study once they begin teaching because they realize they need to know more about the work than they do. But in some cases, they want to specialize. So, an important characteristic of teachers and professionals is that their professional learning continues well beyond when they begin that particular occupation. In terms of teaching qualifications are of two types, really. Well, they include two sources of material. What content to teach, and then how to teach that content to certain groups of students. So, for example, you may be a high school history teacher, so you'll need obviously to have a content knowledge or a knowledge of history, but you also need to teach that particular subject. In that, the skills are the same, whether we are talking primary, early childhood, secondary, university, or whatever. But some are also to do with a particular group of students that might be a particular year level, but it also might include people, for example, with disabilities or other specialized needs. So, what does it mean to be a professional? Here are a number of characteristics that we see with professional practice. As we'd already mentioned, there's some sort of formal qualification before you can begin to work, and that may be a university or college diploma gained over time, and that time can vary from 1 to 4 or 5 years or more. The second characteristic we've mentioned is specialized knowledge. How to teach certain content or how to teach certain groups of students. What we also see with a profession is that there is some sort of license or permission to practice. So in many jurisdictions, it is required of teachers that they have registration, others not so. The other characteristic of being a professional is that there are very high expectations for both behavior and practice, and in the case of teaching, we'll examine what the expectations are and what they cover. The final aspect of being a professional is we are talking about somebody with high personal standards and values. Now, we are going to look at your reasons for becoming a teacher. The reasons other people have given for that career choice. What I would like you to do at some point is to talk to some of your classmates about the reasons they wanted to become a teacher. Some people, for example, would say that they always wanted to be a teacher. Other people will say that teaching was something they came to as a result of various influences. Others, it may well have been the fact that there wasn't much choice for them. Now, I would like you just to think for a moment on the things that you find most satisfying in teaching career. What things give you most satisfaction? Can you list those? What are the 3 or 4 main things that really inspire you and make you want to do the job? Now, on the other hand, can you also list 3 or 4 things that you find most dissatisfying in teaching? Most unenjoyable, the things you don't really like that much. And when you look at your responses, do you notice any patterns there? Becoming a better teacher, knowing more, being more experienced, knowing the strategies and the responses that they need to be able to demonstrate to move student learning forward. Now, there is a YouTube clip for you entitled I Am a Teacher. I'd like you to have a look at that and to think of some issues that are important. What are the characteristics of teachers? What do they do? What do teachers believe in general? Now put together these characteristics, make up a successful professional teacher. As you see and as you know, being a professional teacher is not easy and it's very important and it can be very rewarding. Now we are going to explore what society expects of teachers in more detail. We talked about the fact that society has high expectations for members of professions. In the case of teaching, we are going to now look at what these expectations include. The first expectation is that teachers occupy a position of trust. Parents, caregivers, the community generally hand over their children for a large portion of their lives to teachers and to schools. And as a result, they have high expectations. And we will see for both their teachers and for their children in that situation of schooling. Parents, when they are asked about what they really want for their children at school, tend to talk about three things. They want their children to be happy, they want them to be safe, and they want them to be well educated. These are the basis for what we have as expectations for teachers, but we are going to look in much more detail about what it means, both to be happy and safe, but also to be well educated. So there are many things that parents and guardians or caregivers expect from teachers. There really is a long list of expectations. Now to return to an earlier issue. Is it reasonable for parents to expect the teacher and the school to do their job for them? We will now look at the issue of the importance of the teacher to student outcomes and development, a very important part of being a professional and what we are trying to achieve as teachers. I think today, as a result of many decades of research, we have a very good idea what a good teacher looks like. We know what good teaching looks like, right? We know what leadership in schools that is effective looks like. Our big problem is upskilling. In other words, we want to see a good teacher, a quality teacher, an effective one in every classroom. That really is a big question. So what we are going to consider is the importance of teaching to student outcomes, but also how it can vary as well. So now our main aim in education is to make best practice common practice. How do we, for example, break down the isolation of the individual classroom? How can we learn from the most effective teachers? How can we develop our teachers who may be less effective and still have many years of their career in front of them? So when we look at a successful classroom, a successful faculty, a successful faculty, or successful school, what are the common features? Well, the first of these is that in those classrooms and schools, every student is known as a learner and a person. So there are two parts to this. The learner is their academic achievement. What can they do at the present time? What can't they do? What do they need to do to improve their academic performance? But that's not enough. We also need to know them as a person, because we know, for example, that the relationship between teachers and their students has a large effect on student achievement. Now we put all those things together, what we hopefully see is quality teaching, which again is a two-sided coin. The quality of the teacher and the quality of teaching that they produce. Now, some people will say, with computers, with the internet, we don't need teachers anymore. Here's a quote for you from Bill Gates, who is fairly well known in the area of computing and ICT. And his view is, along with many others, that we actually need good teachers more than ever because of the amount of material that's available on the internet. Yes, there's a whole lot of knowledge that's only a mouse click away, but we need good teachers to be able to guide our students through all of that material that's out there at the present time. The biggest in-school influence on student achievement is obviously the classroom teacher. And there is a quote there from John, which is most important. It is what teachers know, do, and care about, which is very powerful in this learning equation.